Hey everyone, and welcome back to the Cocoa Nomad channel where I talk about financial and location independence and share tools, tips, and techniques to help you make a living and a life. And this is another in my income stream series where I talk about my attempts to reach financial independence by creating multiple income streams. Now, just to review, I did mention that I am really trying to set this up for 2022. I'm just trying to get a head start. So I started in August. Actually, I started in July, but July wasn't a lot of income. And I'm really focused on putting in the work to create these streams by setting the table for a couple of these streams and getting these things ready. Some of these things are actually already starting to bear fruit. So I wanted to share those as I'm going along the way. But you will start to see that over time, these individual income streams are growing, representing more diversification for me within my income. And that's the goal. The goal is to diversify so I'm not overly dependent on one stream versus another. So, and lately, the very focus has been on options trading. I discovered it really recently. It was actually after I started. I really thought that my investment income stream would be more focused on dividends, and then I would just start to increase that and start to buy more dividend paying stocks. But once I started looking at some of the strategies for options trading and got over some of my initial fear of it and really started to understand, I've decided that I would focus on that a little bit earlier and use that as an alternative to just doing the dividend portion of that. So let's dive in and see how we did in the month of October. And there are some surprises here that actually caught me off guard, to be honest, despite some of the setbacks. So if we break down what I have in terms of income streams, you'll see that by percentage, my full-time job is still the number one source of income, and it represents still almost 80% of my total income, but it is decreasing. And if you've been following along from some previous months, you know that I've gone from it being non-existent because I was just primarily doing consulting to adding the full time and watching it grow to be almost all of the income, maybe about 85 to 90%, to now slowly start to go down. And now it's representing 78.5% for the month of October. That's great. I want to see it continually decrease. Not that I want a pay decrease, but just its representation of the total pie. I want it to be smaller. The big surprise this month, though, is that there is a new number two. In the last few months, my consulting income had typically been the number two source of income by percentage, being as high as 20% once the full-time income took over. And at first it was 100%, slid down to 20%. Now it's actually moved down to third place with a new number two, which is investment income, which in the month of October represented 11% of the total amount of income coming in. And that is due to this investment strategy of focusing on options trading. And if you want more detail of what I'm doing there, I'm going to drop a link. You can follow along to the investment reports that I've started doing on a month-by-month basis, along with some individual reports that talk about some of the ups and downs and ins and outs of my options trading strategy, which is primarily focused on two things: selling covered calls and selling cash secured puts. I'm not buying any options. That is far more risky, and I have no interest in participating in that until I can figure out a way to mitigate that risk. I'm always about risk management and risk mitigation. This is my money, so I'm not playing around. Let's continue though, and we'll see that with consulting, it has moved down to third place, but not really that much further below the investment percentage, which is 10.5%. It represented in the month of October. Now, the other big surprise inside of this is that all of the other streams are at 0%. Typically, they'd be like a 0.5%, maybe 0.2, something like that. That would be represented in media and merch. But I didn't sell any t-shirts. And while I did sell some stickers in my Redbubble account, and I did make some money in the media category because I do get a little bit of ad sponsorship money on my podcast, I did not take any of that money out. That money is still sitting in those respective accounts, so they weren't withdrawn. So this month, I don't count them as income. I'm waiting until I hit like a higher threshold. And also in the digital products category, I mentioned in the previous video that I had to pull one of my apps, or I didn't pull it. Apple actually pulled one of my apps from the App Store. So I only have the one, and that one hasn't sold either. So it's just been a very, very dry month in those categories. And I still haven't launched any courses yet. You may not know, but in the courses category, my course plan is not to necessarily release a course about investing or how to be a digital nomad or anything like that. Although that's a possibility, my focus is really on trying to create courses around my software development career, doing software development on iOS, building iOS apps and apps for the watch and the iPad and the Mac, things like that. That's really my wheelhouse. I really like all of these streams to be as aligned as much as possible so that I'm not having to sort of get outside of my skill set, my experience set when I'm creating these things. Even in terms of my merch is, typically things around programming, stickers about programming, my t-shirts and jokes about, liking Swift or loving Swift and having it be my love language, or, some other joke about some aspect that only programmers would get. So it's very, very niche, but it's super, super connected to all the other things that I'm doing. In fact, the one that is really sort of outside of this is the investment. But I mean, there's some analytical aspects to that as well, and how I choose what I want to do and pick a strategy. So there's some calculations there. It's not really programming. Although there will be a connection to that in the long term with another product that is directly related to investing. But that's a longer term thing that I don't expect to see pay off any dividends or even appear until probably the second half of 2022. So let's move into another view of these income streams. And this is another way that I like to look at it and focus, is based on using those streams and viewing them based on type. And you'll see here that I have three categories: active, scalable, and passive. And just to review, I consider active income like my full-time job and my consulting, where I'm actively working many hours and I'm essentially trading time for money. And that is whether it's on an hourly basis or a salary basis, or even a project basis. I'm really, really actively involved in generating that income. The scalable are areas like the apps in the App Store, or the t-shirts and the merch, or even things like the YouTube channel and the podcast, where I put in some work, but it's a fixed amount. And then that income can scale over time based on advertising revenue, based on the number of sales that I get from people who are interested in any of those products. And I'm not having to really put any more time or much more time there. Now, there may be for apps some tech support or some maintenance and things like that, but it's not a direct one-to-one correlation where I put this many hours in and I get this much income out. It can scale very high. And then the passive, the category is really at this time basically the investment category, because that's where I don't really put a lot of time in. I do some research and I do some learning, and I'm doing more now because it's new for me in the last couple of months. But on a day-to-day basis, I'm not spending a lot of time actively. I'm not an active day trader. I don't spend a lot of time looking at charts. I kind of casually glance. I look at it about as much as I look at how my fantasy football team is doing, quite frankly. But of course, it's more important that I do the necessary work up front and understand if a player goes down in my fantasy league, it's not that big of a deal. Yeah, I'll take a loss, but there's a cap set of money that's going to cost me. That's just like the $20 or whatever that we all threw in at the beginning of the season. I am not about to do that with my investments. So, but I analyze and mitigate that risk on the outset so that when I make my choices, I pretty much know where those losses are going to be if a particular trade goes against me. And then I try to manage that. So some people might argue about the passivity, but it's far more passive in that category than the other two categories. And it can go up while I'm not doing anything or paying attention just as easily as it can go down. So looking at this, you can see that I'm still very, very dependent on active income, active labor, active work, active input. And that's sitting at 89% right now. So the long-term goal is to get that down. But so far, it's actually moved down a bit from basically 100%. It had been sitting at that 99 or 98% value for the last few months. But now that that income, investment income, is starting to creep up, it's represented 11% in the month of October. And I'm incredibly excited about that. I think that is really good. And that's the direction I want to go. I really want that amount to increase. Now, I do want the scalables to increase too. And at some point, I'd like the scalable and the passive to far outweigh the active and move that down a lot. But I know that's taking time. So just to kind of review what's happening here, my investment stream has surpassed the consulting stream, and that's one big thing. And then the investment stream is touching on something that I think is important. I've talked about this in another video that I will link in the description. And that is this rule I came across on, I think, the Making of a Millionaire Medium page. And that is a 10% rule of side income. And basically, as I laid out all of these streams, the goal for each of the streams is to reach at least 10% of the overall amount or percentage to my overall income. So that each of those, and I outlined 7, and I'll link the 7 streams that I'm talking about, but you could see them in the first graphic here when we talked about the streams by type, and so, or the active streams. So we saw that there were 4 that didn't do anything this month, but it's okay. Eventually, I'd like to see that sort of level out. So you're seeing 10%, 10%, 10%, 10%, 10% at a minimum, and then, whatever the other ones are. But that the percentages can move, but I want each of them to at least represent 10%, so that if anything happens into any of those categories, I'm not overly dependent, and I still have decent income coming in. And I want that diversification, because to me, that is risk mitigation, not just the risk in a particular thing, the risk of maybe losing a job, the risk of losing a client, the risk of not having a great month in investing, the risk in my YouTube channel being demonetized, even though it's not even monetized, I don't have enough viewers, or losing the podcast, or an app's getting pulled from the App Store. Almost all of these things, other than the demonetization, have already happened to me. And I wasn't thinking in terms of diversification this way, and I wasn't as proactive as I am now. But all of those events happening really got me to get it in gear, and was kind of a kick in the pants, to be honest, to get serious about this, even at a later age. And so I just want to make sure that, you understand. And if you're trying to do something similar, I don't give financial advice in terms of, like, I can't tell you where to put your money in terms of investments. How would I know? I just got started. And you really shouldn't listen to anybody on YouTube anyway. I mean, there's people can tell you anything, and I'm not selling you anything. Like I said, there's nothing to sell. But I do recommend that you diversify your income streams. I think that's a good idea. I think you want to mitigate risk and exposure to something to life happening, because life happens, and it reduces your stress, and it just provides you an extra level so that you can just say, okay, I know things that might happen, but I feel better prepared to deal with that. The other thing about that too is that when these streams are coming in, once you've met your basic needs and you're paying your bills and your cost, then it gives you the opportunity also to do something with that money. And that can be savings or investing, some combination of that, or donation, which is another thing that you can do. In fact, I didn't mention this in my investment report, but I did say that there's something big that I wanted to do with the money if I hit a higher goal next, which is what's coming up. And what's next is increasing the investment income, because that's the stream I'm really focused on right now. And I'm probably just going to stay focused on that until the end of the year as a primary focus. Now, I'm making videos, and I'm hoping to get to a point where my YouTube channel is monetized. And I'm working on my website and podcast and all those things to increase those and monetize those as well. But my primary focus right now is just continue to study options trade and continue to get better at that. But my goal for this next period is to reach a particular dollar amount in the investment category, which is $1,500. And I'll talk more about that in the investment report that you can see, again, linked in the description. And there's a reason for that. I typically have an amount of money that comes out every month for a couple of charities that I donate to that are important to me. And I always feel bad that I can't give more. And so one of the great things about what's been happening with the income from the investment streams is it gave me an opportunity to really feel like, okay, if I can have another stellar month, I can take that money and I can donate it, and I can really have an even greater impact in these areas that I really, really care about. And in that video, if I hit this amount, I'm going to that's where the money's going to go. And I'll share which charities and why and those things in a later video. But right now, I just want some like positive vibes and just like rooting for me to hit that number, to get to that $1,500, because it's not all about me. My why isn't just about me. My why is achieving these goals are about the impact that I can have on other people. So basically, every dollar of that, when I hit that number, is going to these 3 charities that I do care a great deal about. And further along with that, to close out, if you want to help me and support this channel, really all I really need at this point is just likes and subscription and just watching the videos. That helps the channel. It helps it grow, to help more people find it. I'm not concerned about, getting ad revenue right now, or selling a course, or even, I don't even have any like affiliate links or anything in here, because it's just not my focus right now. Some of them that will probably change in the near future, because there are some things that I think are good tools that I like to use, services that I'm having a lot of fun using. And if you want to do that at some point in the future, then that's great. But right now, don't really care. It's not my focus. But smashing that like button, really big deal. I really appreciate it. So thanks as always for watching, listening, and supporting the channel. If you're watching the podcast, sharing it as well as the channel, it helps immensely, and I'm really grateful for it. As always, I hope you have an amazing day, and I will talk to you next time. Cheers.